everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Grid. My name is Swaroop Kariath. I'm your host. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to someone I've known for about 10 years or 10 plus years now. He was a system controller to start with, then became the Director of Operation Systems at the AESO, an Alberta Electric System Operator. And then he decided to take a completely different leap halfway across the globe, went to become the director of grid operations at Neom in Saudi Arabia. So I have the privilege of welcoming Murray Mueller, who is currently the director of grid operations at Neom. Murray, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you, Shrew.
Great. Let's get started. You look not a day older than the last I saw you. What's the secret behind this? Is it good food in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but I think a lot of it is that things we grew up with in Alberta and in the industry of not just looking after yourself but looking after each other kind of adds to things. And quite frankly, the years go by quicker than you realize. Some of the old retirees say, "Careful, it goes by quick," but I
Yeah,
can tell you, it goes by very fast. So it's
you bet. You bet. Let's start from the beginning. Like, how did you get into grid operations? And I understand you spent a long stint as system controller before you took on leadership roles. Maybe start from the beginning. What led you to this field of work?
Well, I think deep down, and I try to make sure my kids understand this too. I mean, you're a young person going through school and at university, and it's always that. Way back when I started, it was okay. You go to school, you get a job, and you make a living in a family. And from there, I think times have changed since then. Times have changed before then. I think there was what driven me a lot was just a pure curiosity of how things worked, curiosity about life, and quite frankly, the opportunity that was in Alberta and now in Saudi Arabia. Before I was a system controller, I was in the field, so to speak, as a lineman. I spent almost 10 years doing line work, and I loved every minute of it. And then I just had this interest in the control room and what that was about. Got in there. From there, it was, again, the learnings, the interest was always piquing my curiosity, and just one thing to another. When things are unfolding, there's more versus stagnant. It was just a kind of one of those things that I appreciated having the opportunity. Maybe more courage than brains to do some of the roles I've done, but each one was met with its challenges, but also with a ton of encouragement with people in the industry. So as you learn, as you grow up, as you have a family of your own, you realize that you need to not only you need to pass it down, but it becomes part of you to pass some of that down to different folks, different generations, and even to colleagues, older and younger. So it's that desire to do something new, the curiosity, and that underlying thing that especially the control rooms have. We look after each other no matter what's going on, and it's all better as a team than as one. So that really kind of hit to the core, and that 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 whether I succeeded in roles or failed in them drastically, I always learned something. Always helped shape me for the next, and I think it keeps your mind going. I always say to my others, my kids, and my wife that it's very important to be curious and have that desire. And there's always something new. Some say attention deficit disorder, whatever the new phrase is, but it's more like a curiosity that
Yeah.
I thought got older and maybe go away, but it becomes more as I'm older. So appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone involved along the way. It's met some incredible people like yourself, and along the way, just some. If I look back now, it's just a bunch of laughs, a bunch of fun, a bunch of adventures. So always remember the good stuff and take the bad stuff for what it was.
Yeah, great. I actually did not know that you started as a lineman.
Yeah.
That is quite an experience. I was recently in a podcast, we were talking about who are some of the most underappreciated, uncelebrated people in the power industry. Two groups stood out. One is the field services folks, And second was the people in the system control room, right? Not many people understand what they do. You've done both. That is great. That's terrific.
Well, it's interesting the saying we kind of have now. I'd rather be the guy behind the camera than the one in front of it. I got a face for it. So this podcast is new for me, but there's something about that. Yeah, I'm not just underappreciated, but I think not very many. The general population doesn't know what goes into that in terms of sacrifice. How those two groups are incredibly creative individuals and very resilient groups. So just to be associated with that is
What if you were to tell someone what will be the most toughest part of being in field service that people don't necessarily know about? What would be that one thing?
I think a lot of it the one thing, especially I notice in young people today, or even going forward, there's one thing that's very underappreciated. And when you first get into it, when I started, there was a very heavy focus on safety. And I know some few young linemen today. I got a nephew doing it. It becomes very critical of how the safety from what they do
Absolutely.
for what I did was leaps and bounds. But even before that, I think that it's very underappreciated. I think there's a lack of understanding of what it means to be safe. So the pressure comes downward to certain groups. So either overcompensating or undercompensating with that. But the safety part to me is one of the things that I think even when you're in it, you need that senior mentorship. You need that
Yeah.
senior eyes. And quite honestly, I had it. And there was no how do I put it? There was no. It was very direct feedback. You didn't have time for some hurt feelings along the way. Your safety, your life was at stake in a lot of those things. A 90-foot pole in a snowstorm or live wire, live line work, that type of thing is dangerous. It can kill you. So that's the
Yeah, I
most
mean, you
underappreciated
hear
piece.
yeah, you hear cases every year, right? Like even just recently, I think there was something in Ontario where somebody lost their life. So it's a
Well,
very
it happens every year.
yeah,
I think the statistic that always stuck in my mind. The mining industry has the most deaths in terms of that field piece. Then the next is the line field services O&M piece in the electrical world. It's because of the electricity, but it's also because of the heavy equipment. And now, especially in the last 20 years, with the focus on cost, focus on efficiency, I think sometimes that I'm not sure if it's better. Maybe the safety equipment, the procedures, everything's better, but the accidents are still happening. And one is too many. I think folks in that space, it's more than just a job, more than just a career to them. It's
absolutely.
that's where the
Yeah. Yeah.
the
One of
same
the
thing with the
one of,
sorry, the same thing with the control rooms as well,
yeah.
right? Those guys doing the 24/7s, and they can put the wrong switch out if they're not careful, if they're not following these procedures, and have someone die in the field. So it is related, and it's just as equally not worse knowing that you may be responsible for somebody else like that.
Yeah. About the control room, it's a good pivot into what I wanted to go next. What do you think is something that people don't necessarily understand that happens behind the scenes in real time operations? General public is not aware of it, right? Like what happens, what is a day in the life of a controller, if I were to call it that way?
Well, I kind of alluded to this much more than a day. It's like a day in the rotation of a controller. Like they're 24/7, and it's a little bit different than a firefighter role. My son's a fireman right now. They're a little bit different. They're more active. This is monitor until something happens. They're 24/7. They run a shift. Kind of like if you think about the general public, it's like a general jet lag as part of your role. Sure, you get time off. You get when you're done your shift, you're home and you're done. You don't take work with you usually, but it's the health thing that the people worry about. System controllers or operators who've been doing it a while, they always battle their health from their cardiac rhythm is kind of always in flux.
Yeah.
They have to do a lot of management in terms of their health, and sometimes it gets to the best of them. And then there's that part of it, but also if you're on shift work, your family's on shift work, right?
True. That is very true.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things that I think are very much underappreciated by the general public, or even that working in the same company, people don't quite understand unless you've been through it. But it has a huge impact. So these guys are expected to make split-second decisions and get it right all the time. Plus, they have that other pressure of maybe not feeling up to their best 24/7 on every shift. So it's a hard haul, and the companies, I don't think, as you go get a little bit more into the modern times like we are now, I think they forget about those learnings along the way.
You bet. You bet. And it's also a lot of the split second decisions that they make, right? There is tools available to support you, but still it comes down to the human quite a bit.
Well, very much so. I'm going to quote a very dear friend of mine, Bob Shepard. He says he's a system controller. I like to say from the old days, now deservingly retired. But he says you can't trust your tools or your procedures in a control room. You have to trust yourself. You're not trusting it. You're not questioning it. You're not quite understanding what it means to actually click on that video screen to open that
Yeah.
break. Right. So, I mean, like I say, that I think as a group, and no insult to any other group, but they're one of the most creative folks that I've ever met who sit in that chair day to day. And they have to come up with decisions based on their training, based on the tools, and they sometimes have to make ones that contradict. Not very often, but once they do that, they need to be comfortable. They know what they're doing because there are lives at stake. Multi-million dollars of equipment and market are at stake, right? So they make those decisions every second, every day. And then if it does go wrong, they roll back, and the support staff too is equally important. Rolls into new tool development, rolls into training, rolls into procedures. That's how we all get better. And then those guys train every 3-4 weeks. They're in training to augment that decision making. So um, there's lots of theory on leadership, management, decision making, and I think there's no greater decision making raw process than a system controller or an operator to do those
Yeah.
type of things.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of stories where if there is an emergency on the power grid, the the real-time manager takes precedence over anybody, right? Even the CEO of the ASO will have to kind of listen to what the RTM is deciding because that's the order of precedence, right?
Well, yeah, if yeah, like there's many stories out there where directors, VPs, CEOs have come into the control room and tried to overrule decisions. Part of the 2000, I believe 2003 blackout, part of that finding was that every control room to be compliant to the NERC standards, the guys in the chair had to have a letter from the signed off by the governing body of the company, meaning the CEO, that they were allowed to shed load based on the procedures that they had in place. A lot of times before that, that there would be CEO management for political reasons, whatever reasons, but for the health of the grid, they need to make that decision. That letter's up there, but quite frankly, any controller or operator worth his salt knows he needs to do that because that's his job. So, I mean, it's there, but yeah, there's been many stories, and I've seen them. I've seen them firsthand where there's trying to be interject, and that's where real-time managers and director of operations are very good, especially at the ISO, of pushing back and saying no, we can't do it that way. So that's rare these days. It's still there. So I
Yeah.
hope it continues.
Knowing some of the characters who have played that role, I can imagine they would push back and they would push back hard, right? They don't take no, they don't take they don't take orders unless it is absolutely in in guidance with the
Well,
rules and the
at the end of the day,
regulations.
they're in charge of the reliability of the grid and in the market in the ISO's case. So, you know, if they can't hold that to the standard, right or wrong, then kind of as a general public or a guy who uses electricity,
Yeah,
you need those guys, and they are underappreciated, quite frankly, when they make those calls because they just make them like a normal, non-controversial call. Right? To them, it's no different. Maybe they take a little gruff. Maybe the manager has to stand tall and take some gruff, but that's what we all do for each other. So it's important, right? It's important.
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's just take it forward from a career perspective. After being the system controller for a while, you took on leadership roles. So, what was the biggest shift in terms of the way you work, the way you approach things once you took on that leadership role?
Yeah, that I think if you when I think back to my when I started in the industry's alignment to that making that shift from that they call it the individual contributor role or assistant
Yeah,
controller lineman or whatever that is into that leadership role. The biggest adjustment I think anyone and everyone has to make is you are no longer the expert in that role. You need to depend on your people in that role, right? You need to depend on that senior system controller and that junior one coming up, right? You need to depend on them from a leadership perspective. You need to listen to what they're saying, depending on your experience, because usually that's how folks get promoted into those roles. They're very good as a controller or an engineer or a IT system architect, for instance. They're very, very good in that role. So the first level of management is making that adjustment. And that first step is quite hard, right? I wouldn't say it's the hardest because as you go up from manager to director to the position I'm in, there is other adjustments that are equally challenging, and it depends on your experience. It also depends on your age and your perception. Just moving into the spot I'm in now in Saudi, it's a huge change
yeah,
where you have to, a different culture, not just Saudi, but there's 109 different nationalities represented by
it's
Neom. So
huge.
that's a lot of different language barriers, a lot of different cultural things. And, you can tell the same passion exists. Communication becomes your craft versus my knowledge of system controller or engineering, right? So you really need to understand how to listen and how you're behaving. But again, you kind of boil it down to what you learn in the control room or in the field. You know what? Sometimes you need to listen instead of talk, and sometimes you need to talk instead of listen to everybody and make a decision. Decisions are timely, delivery is important, right? And how you do it is kind of the key. And you learn that in every leadership position you take.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And now you brought up Neom. Let's just pivot into that. Neom, as I understand, is this futuristic city that Saudi is building, right? Extremely futuristic. For somebody who is not familiar with Neom, how do you explain it?
Yeah, the best way I can explain it right now. It's ongoing, right? A part of my desire to kind of get to do that and accept the like at the time 2 years ago and accepted the position, or when I started the position, like it took about 8 months before that of back and forth before I got there. Starting fresh, new country, fresh faces after my time in Alberta was difficult from a personal perspective. From a professional one, it was enlightening for a lot of different reasons. Starting fresh, Greenfield power system, build everything up from regulation to this concept called 100% renewable grid to hydrogen energy to having transmission distributions market and telecommunications under me. From a control room perspective, it was very appealing, but also very daunting, right? It's like from someone in North America, especially in Western Canada, and we have that bravado of the field and the control room, and very proud of what we do. That comes as a very big, not humbling, but it's a different way people think, the way people respond. And so, I mean, like challenging the norm or challenging maybe something that you don't quite agree with takes thought, takes a different approach. So it's challenging that way. Meaning, that's in North American mindset, that's sort of crazy, but meaning, and the IT guys especially got to grasp on this and how they do development, right? It forces a solution. It forces innovative thinking. It forces things that haven't been done before. And we need to align with this. A futuristic line city, 170 kilometers long. No one's ever done that. How do you do that? That's what
Yeah,
we're here for.
exactly.
How do you put power into that? Well, the same way we did it in 1980? Probably not, right? So you have to listen to the crazy ideas and the crazy questions that you think are crazy, but just some things that actually go, hey, why can't we do that? And we're doing it right now, right? We move in one of our control rooms into a telecommunications hub, which has feeds in down the Horn of Africa through the Suez Canal. So we have access to communication worldwide and access to data worldwide. So what does that mean for a control room? Well, we didn't build our own in some remote location like we traditionally do, isolated with guard towers and all that. We're
Yeah,
now in a secure communication facility in the Red Sea. So there's things like, that
it's very interesting.
can happen quickly, go from theory and thought to it happens very, very quickly, right? Out of necessity. So it's a different mindset, it's a different culture. The Western media has a different spin on what they see, but being on the ground, it's very much a go, very much. I've been down in the line where they're digging and have mobile cement plants and digging pilings. I think it's the largest earth moving project right now on the planet. So
Wow.
lots of things going on. And just to see it, be part of it is something I want to tell my grandchildren about.
For
So,
sure, it is an experience.
yeah,
Neom is promising 100% renewable power, right? Isn't that correct?
that's the objective. Yes.
What are the challenges associated with that, though, right? I know I imagine being Saudi, you have no shortage of solar power. I would think so, right? But there's got to be challenges with that.
So
Not a lot of water, not a lot of hydro.
there's a little bit of wind, potential for a lot of solar, but one of the wishes and call it a mandate or what needs to happen is whatever, and that's probably for the Lion City. If you're going to procure land for right of ways for overhead power line, that takes up a percentage of the land. A lot of things get built underground. So that's one of
Sure.
the biggest challenges is the land use mandate. You get underground HVDC 630 kV culverts with 6 different lines. You can drive trucks down these culverts that are getting built. Underground, you don't want to see out 10 kilometers on either side of the line, so it's underground for that distance. So that's just the transmission of power. Now we have green hydrogen, one of the biggest I think it is the biggest green hydrogen facility right now. It's going through some changes like projects do, but there's that kind of hydrogen fueled electricity. Solar and wind are always the go-to when you talk of renewable, but what else are
Yeah.
they looking at, right? So, I mean, the thing is we need to supply the electricity, not just today or by 2030 or 2035, but they're looking at 2050, 2070 in these long-term plans. So,
Yes.
unfortunately, you and I may be gone by 2070, right? So,
Can't be so sure.
well,
I always leave out in hope.
hope's important, but reality is too. So,
True.
but I mean, so they got plans, and they're serious about putting the money in. Just the world economy and the current condition of the world dictates some biased news reports. I mean, the amount of money, the amount of people, the amount of commitment. And the thing I've learned about Saudi, it's very much about the reputational piece of the kingdom. They're very, very proud people, and rightly so. And they're proud of what they're doing. They really don't take on nothing without making sure that, what this success look like is always the question. Like for many colleagues and I from Germany, from Australia, from wherever, Venezuela, we were driving to job sites and we thinking, how on earth are they gonna do this, right? And then it becomes, how are we gonna do that? But the whole thinking part of it, so it's very interesting how much they're leveraging today for that future and for their people. It's very
Awesome.
actually
Awesome.
inspiring in a lot of
So,
ways.
so I hear a lot of green hydrogen, utilities grade storage as well, batteries.
Yes, yes, a little bit, but there's some still like I mean, they deal with. So I guess I can divulge this. It's not public information, but so battery storage takes land, takes space, right? So they build it outside of the Neom region. Is that considered renewable energy and imported in, right? Old mentality in North America and interchange, yes. So some of these decisions like that, they get vetted right up to
Very
province.
interesting.
So it's that kind of decision.
That's very interesting. So there is, I would say, almost also, though it's not a regulatory authority that's overseeing it, the standards are pretty high in terms of meeting that barrier for success and barrier for what is called renewable, right?
So, I mean, the big question is how do you define renewables at Neon? Well, we all can jump into our definition of it, but I think it's one of those things we're defining as we go. that's kind of one of the challenges you put out there. Like you might put 3 or 4 solutions ahead that go, no, this ain't cutting it, whether it's a technical one, whether it's related to the environment, but it kind of shapes on how you define renewables. Saudi will define that. Let's face it, like from where we are today, from our experience in the technology, there's no such thing as 100% renewable interconnected system. You always get diesel from somewhere, or coal, or gas, or the big push in especially in the U.S. right now is with the small modular nuclear reactors, all those things. So, the committees here, the regulatory bodies, the framework here doesn't quite promote that innovation at the same rate it does over in Saudi. So it's interesting. Like I think the innovation will come. There's a race. There's that technology always bridges the gap. But what we need to do like the old. I had an old Sandra Scott I didn't directly report to her guys, but she had a saying. It's like trying to change the tire on a moving car. And I know you and I have talked about that on many projects.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Versus starting Greenfield where, hey, we don't have anything yet. What do we want to design? Right?
That is a very interesting experience, right? Like just have that opportunity to build something ground up is phenomenal. Like you
Well,
don't get
like
to do that.
I used to, I used to say, I wish I was coming into the industry at this time, right? Because of
Yeah.
the things, the changes that need to happen are going to happen. They're going to be forced with all the conversation. But this was one of those drivers that helped me towards this decision, which quite frankly, I sacrificed a lot personally to do. I mean, I live and work in Saudi Arabia, right? My family's here. So having that opportunity is a once in a career opportunity, right? And at this stage, I'm in a good spot to go. So it's the I think the learnings, the experience, like most things, you won't really appreciate till after it's done and it's over with. But again, my next phase in my professional career, this is going to, I think, afford a lot of opportunity, just a lot of different perspective in whatever I choose to do next. But I got another year left on the contract over there, and we'll see what happens after that. But it's just been the thinking, the conversations, the debates. You'll never get that like that anywhere else, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. What an experience. What an experience. So what when you're building something from the ground up and breaking new ground in a lot of cases, the control room ought to be looking completely different than what we used to here, right? The pieces of technology that you use, just even the look and feel, I would think, has to be completely different. I know certain aspects of it you cannot get into, divulge the details. You don't need to, but based on what you can share, like how different is it?
I think really, if you think so, really, what we're talking here is you try to bridge the gap. There is a power system right now in the region. It's small. It's very like I'm not even sure how many megawatts it comes out to. Maybe
Yeah,
2 or 3.
startup limited. Yeah,
Right? It's very small. There is power there. A lot of it diesel fed, right? So we built a few control rooms based on standard distribution, island operation. You have control room on the mainland. You have the longest subsea cable feeding a luxury island on a resort that you run the power for a super yacht club, for instance. That's one of the islands called Sandela. Maybe received some bad press in the opening, but it's very much real and challenging. Those type of things you kind of build with, okay, this is what we want, and then you make the concessions like anything else. When they're talking the overall system, they coined the phrase. You all heard of microgrids, but if you've ever heard the term gigagrid, it's sort of on that scale, just a super large microgrid with 7 or 8 or 9 now. The forecast changes for depending on the year. By 2035, they were looking at 30 gigawatts. Now I think it's like by 2030, it's 2.5 gigawatts. Forecasts always change, right? But what we're looking at there is, okay, so how do you do that, right? One thing we've learned, and I know you and I've talked about this over the years, they're that, where do you want to be on that technology cycle? Technology changes all the time. There's a risk of adopting and a risk of not adopting. right? So the old traditional EMSs with the operator in that decision-making role, with the advancements in AI, especially in that region, is phenomenal. Some public safety command and control rooms, and I'm shocked of what I've seen and how advanced AI is. So when you think about, especially the last year, it's things like ChatGPT and Copilot and how much everyone's using it. The control room will need to adopt that. We'll need to adopt that technology. We'll need to understand what that makes for the decision making. Even some of the market things we talk about, the 1 minute settlement instantly, those type of things. How does a control room look for that? I mean, we have partners, to the partners, but with some pretty high end partners like a Google or an Amazon or a Microsoft, to help.
Or an IBM.
Yeah, or especially an IBM, right? But I think those players at that level are going to need to get involved, where traditionally their control room monitoring and strategy and standards has always been consistent over probably last 80 years. I think it will probably change driven by the technology. We have a saying when we talk about control room design at Neom, especially coming out of my group, and that's out of my mouth, is no data, no electrons. So we're going to become dependent on that data and what we do with it. And once we lose the data, it's going to be a contingency. So wrap your mind around that. Wrap your mind on 1 minute settlement. That doesn't mean it's happening, but those are the discussions that get done when you talk about Greenfield. How do you want it to work?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we get into some pretty heavy players, especially from that European market and market design, how we want it to work, what's acceptable in terms of the KSA base economy, by what year. There's some things you'd plan that I think maybe back in, when we were young, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when that stuff started unfolding in North America, it's starting all over again, but from scratch, right? So that's fairly interesting how they want to do that and by when, right? And again, this is one of 10 whatever giga projects, whatever they call it, and this is worth $1.2 trillion. You better come up with some pretty good ideas of how you want to make money with. So these are some very serious people, very educated, very experienced. To be part of the conversation is, like, to me, sometimes I sit back and go, what the heck? It's a poor old lineman from Alberta.
Yeah, I'm even more excited now because I've always thought about, and we have had conversations about this, where AI could play a role in the control room, AI could play a role in grid operations. We have always looked at it as it is going to be a decision support system for now, because AI, I don't see a near future where AI is going to completely handle the grid without a human involved because of hallucinations and things of that. That's powerful decision support system, unlike we have had in the past, right? Like the ability to work through scenarios and come up with this. These are the 5 things you could do. These are the 5 pros and cons, and within those, and allowing to make those split-second decisions in a lot more efficient way, right? That I obviously see. What I am hearing from you though is, like, by the end of it all, we might be seeing some industry-wide breakthroughs from the KSA. That's what
Yeah,
I'm hearing
I
from you.
think if there's, in my sort of less than humble opinion, I think that's definitely where it will come from. From under there's a different set of rules in terms of privacy.
Yeah.
There's a lot less regulatory framework to go through. There's a lot less established, like, power system traditions, regulations, and so forth. So, I mean, you think about how traditionally things get introduced into the control room. It's not some new technologies. I remember, way back in the day, try to, introduce contingency analysis, right? No, don't need it, right? And like eventually, people started seeing the value of it and how we adopt things in. So I think it's the same thing with AI. Where it'll be, where we'll end up, I mean, who knows right now, but there'll be another generation coming in with that where, it's, how many people know how to write written notes versus writing it in on a tablet or typing it in or just doing whatever, right? So I think we'll evolve, but out of necessity, that need will be met. And when you talk about some of this renewable things, some of these early warning signs, predictability, we even got into concepts like the load dispatching the supply versus the supply meeting the load, right? So there's all sorts of ways to,
Load dispatching the supply?
yeah, yeah.
Expand on that a little bit.
I'm afraid to. My North American friends will make fun of me, but that's one of the concepts they talked about. Basically, if it's easy on the way up. It's kind of the same thing, right? You dispatch the load, supply meets the demand. But if you have a supply cap right away, right? If you hit, let's say, 1,000 megawatts, for instance, and you're approaching it, and it's like, no, okay, we're going to do automatic load shedding. We won't let the load go any higher. Meaning, if you're in the line, for instance, and the ambient temperature set to 22 degrees, well, for these next 4 hours, we're going to set it at 28 degrees, or less than the cooling.
Going to be a little more harder than. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
They can do that now. In reality, they call it the load dispatching the supply. So you're dispatching the supply target. But if the price keeps put in a dynamic supply where, you know what, if we have to go to diesel fire generation to meet the load, we're not going to do it because we're 100% renewable system. So those type of in-depth discussions being had, like you say, I mean, I'm maybe not you, but I complain about my power bill all the time, but I'm sure glad when I get my paycheck, right? So it's one of those things like, do we need, right? It's a self-management. There's a social awareness that is being factored in here in terms of the environment, the issues. And Saudi, you add the reputational factor on there, right? People are going to survive at plus 21 degrees C in their air-conditioned cabin or villa versus 26, 28 degrees, whatever that number is. But so they plan on using that demand much more than we in North America, where we demand, no pun intended, we demand to, we want our 21, it's 21, right?
That's a very interesting concept, because if I look at North America, there is a lot of efficiency trapped in buildings. Right? What is the number? 25% efficiency that can be trapped in buildings, and if you had the ability to control based on the demand, you can get a lot more efficient in terms of managing those surges. That's what I've heard, right? Theoretically,
building, not just building, but communities can manage that demand themselves, right? With digital twins. We've actually had one built out of an area in Munich through this Neom project, where you would put the fork, not just what the real time the buildings were doing. You can move heat pumps, you could move building thermostats, all the stuff automatically.
Absolutely.
Set the price you want to pay for that building, set it around the community, and you put that price, and then they would do the automatic adjustments. They do it on digital twin first, and then they would have an execute button for in real time. So those things are being prototyped right now. And so, talk about that whole digital twinning concept and all that, like it's being done. Why can't you do that with the control room? Digital twin that scenario.
Yeah.
I don't want the price of power to go over $500 a megawatt for these next 3 hours. You have that distributed load management, if you would, on an older term, but those things are not just being discussed, they're being built and prototyped, considered of how we're going to put a power system together. And
that is great to hear. That's awesome to hear. Because North America, it's just, we don't have the regulatory framework to be able to do that, because how do you bring these buildings into the proper demand response, right? You don't have the systems to do it. Like IBM did a pilot in the city of Copenhagen just to manage the efficiency in buildings. It's a pilot and it's running successfully, but it's the trouble to scale is the regulatory frameworks have to get caught up and unified, and there is a standard way of approaching these things.
So let me ask you this: what needs to change? Right? We have the technology, we have the know-how. What needs to change? The old regulatory framework.
Regulatory framework, yeah, absolutely.
That's the challenge in North America, where, say, for instance, which means longer, the structure is ingrained in everything. I think this AI, this recent, especially last 6 months, this recent AI center conversation, and how these places are absolutely scrambling to move and locate where the best supply for power is. There was a time when power was never the conversation piece in building these type of facilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Power wasn't part of the conversation.
Wasn't at all. Yeah.
Our regulatory framework, even with the introduction of renewables, in Alberta, we spent 20 years designing the regulatory market framework to fit a power system. And then within 2 or 3 years, the nature of the power system changed with renewables integration.
True.
Right. So
True.
think about
True.
that with things, something like AI and the load demand. So with all these potential of coal, and I'm not going to, maybe it's my own bias taking here, but nuclear facilities take a long time to build, and justifiably so, to meet the demand. And think about who's going to build these facilities. When's the last time a big power plant was built in North America? I think it's 2013. So is there staff around to do that? And let's face it, kids today, would they give them an iPad or a monkey wrench to pick up and make a living? A lot are going to choose the iPad. Okay,
100%.
that's not a bad decision, right? I went from the wrench to the iPad, sort of.
Sort of. Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
There
You're
is a
absolutely right.
social awareness, a social conscience being driven out of the KSA. I think North America has maybe the innovation edge in terms of the sheer capacity, and also big companies wanting to move, but also the workforce is going to be the challenge in the future. The regulatory framework and the workforce needs to
Yeah.
change.
Do you think there is a challenge with how old the grid is and the devices in the grid? Because some of it requires more advanced sensors and ability to control
Yeah,
remotely and things
I
of that
think a
sort, right?
lot of I've noticed it, especially over here or over in Saudi, with the kind of the distribution assumptions, and the new technology in there in terms of stuff like the advanced metering, some of the smart grid architecture on the distribution side, all very theoretical, I think very good. But I think, again, you're building on top of an old system. I mean, old, the 20 to 30-year-old equipment, which maybe in distribution side is not that old. But again, there's that O&M management of those devices, because traditionally, I know in North America, distribution side, it's like you run it as cheap as possible and reliable as possible. Not too much investment in the technology part, and that's starting to come along. When you think about the DERMS and all that stuff, it's coming that way, but it's good in theory. But again, who's going to invest in that? Where do you see the value? What's the long-term benefit? And that's going to, I think, be the challenge, putting that kind of technology in. Not so much it can't be done, but if it takes 4 or 5 years, the
Yeah, that's
technology is
true.
going to change and the opportunity is going to collapse. So I think you got to be realistic. Timing, I would say time the market, but the investors, especially in the last 6, 8 months, with a lot of different areas, seem to have gotten a lot of nervous with the current world, maybe political environment, but that's going to come and go as it always does. I think the challenges are very different in Europe, in North America, and even Australia than they are in the Greater Kingdom. And that's just not Saudi, but Doha, Qatar, Dubai, all those regions are very proactive. They have the money, and they have the will and the desire. They just need the help, right?
Yeah.
So
And I would imagine there's plenty of innovation and help and thought leadership available to them at their disposal, right? Because they have the money. They have the money to hire the smart people like you and get you to relocate to Saudi Arabia, even temporarily.
yeah, so I mean, like I'm absolutely a guest in that country, and absolutely in that workforce. I mean, this is like, to me, it's fascinating. I find the Saudi culture, the Saudi people, are absolutely fascinating on how much pride they have, not just in the country, but what they do and how they do it. So you're not going to change how they do things because it's their country, and they're very happy about that. So, and quite frankly, they're optimistic and positive about the future and what they need to do and what their part is. So, kind of understanding what they want to do and how they want to do things is kind of got to blend the best of both worlds. Resourcing. I think we were talking about that 20 years ago, and it's still a problem today. And maybe it isn't a problem, but it is a problem. I mean, we always seem short resources, the right resources at the right time. Maybe it's the model that's not right anymore. So I think how people want to work in the future, there's a very much a social awareness with the younger generations coming out of university. I find the university students coming out of regions like Tabuk and Riyadh and Jeddah are absolutely phenomenal in the workforce. You would never expect that from a young engineers, business people in North America like they have there. The expectation is very high, and they're very, very high performing people, and they're willing to sacrifice a ton just to get that position and perform well in it. So it's nice to see, right? But it also requires, from a leadership perspective, you need to adjust and allow for that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Just a related question. So, if you look at the field of AI farms are going to take a lot of power. The projections are insane, right? Like, the need to build more and more power generation because all these power hungry AI farms are coming up. North America traditionally getting a power plant up and running, what is it, 10 years with all the regulatory framework in place and the approvals and everything. So it takes time. Even with everything that's going on in the South and the promise to fast
Yeah.
track projects and whatnot too, still it takes time for capital to come in, private funding to come in, for them to get convinced about the project, the feasibility of the project, and go through the necessary approvals and studies and all of that. Whereas if you look at areas like Saudi, there is clearly an advantage, right? Like, you have clear funding available. It's often available with minimal restrictions, with easy approvals, and you have a ton of renewables, a ton of innovation to solve these kind of problems using renewables. Do you see a future where the Middle East starts to take a leadership in that compared to North America? I know it's hard to speculate, but what do you think?
100%. I think there's I think just not just because of that, but again, they're willing to bring in, the not just the approvals or the funding. Those are obviously two big important pieces, right? So the drivers in North America, like regulatory approval and adjusting Senate
Yeah,
bills, and the government mandate, and you have all these regulatory bodies under, things like the MSA, you have NERC compliance. Those things slow down, and they're there for a reason, right? For keeping that reliability component of the entire grid very solid in a sense. But now when it's come time to change, it makes things harder to build, right? Saudi doesn't have that. They can build it. It may take a while to convince in a different way, a different forum. Nobody really wants to tell the crown prince you can't do that. you know, and I would never put myself in somebody's shoes like that. But if I had that kind of money, you're not going to tell me much either,
true,
right? It's my
true.
money. Go find somebody
It's
else to
it's not
sell.
it's not just money; it's power too, right?
It's reputation.
Yeah,
So, that kind of upfront investment in terms of time and money and approval, I think is definitely different. But their ability to execute is also different in North America. I think North America has a standard that's different, not some better, some worse, in terms of
yeah.
how to get construction done. Supply chain, I mean, there's different. Who knows what this tariff conversation will mean short term, but long term, who knows? But again, I think I think for my opinion, I think the advantages with the Middle East and their ability to kind of get that approval and execute. They gotta start in the game. But the two things I think that's common to both is the supply chain and the actual ability to build these facilities, right? Like I almost find, the AI conversation and the data center and the load and how much more it's going to be. I almost find it's in a state of like if for I mean, let's face it, what they're predicting for draw, there's just no way the grid's ever going to be able to institute even a tenth of that. So two things need to happen. Number one, that investment will go somewhere else. And
Correct.
the Middle East is wide open.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or they're going to have to get more efficient in the technology. It's no,
Absolutely right.
like, I don't know, literally don't know technically what these things need to do, but if they're claiming they need this much power, and you have these AI centers claiming they're into the power world, and Senate Bill 6 in Houston, for instance, out of Texas, is talking about, understanding how to build a private utility network to jump the queue, connect 4-year connection queue in ERCOT, right? But
Yeah,
there's those kind of things popping up that are kind of okay. Yeah, somebody can get there first, but it doesn't. What does it do to the reliability of the grid? And I don't think that structure's there. So what does it do to investment? What does it do to the technology, right? And this panic right now, and these causes these, AI data center experts to get, because there's skin in the game now. Their threat is with power. You think of what it takes to go in an AI data center, and power is the problem. That's a huge, huge black mark, a huge thing on our industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the scary part. So that to me is this is the worst time to have that threat. Power should not be a conversation piece in terms of AI data center location or anything else.
But it is 100% now. Yeah, it is
Forget about the
100%.
water. You think about what goes into those facilities. I mean, power is your biggest problem. That we don't know how to handle that in terms of our industry because we never had to. We always had things pre-built. We always had that 20. Oh, it's good for 20 years. 20 years has come and gone, as you and I know, and now here we are, right?
Yeah,
Having
exactly.
conversation instead of doing. We need the people who are doers now.
Yeah,
All us talkers, it's time for
we all should stop the podcast and go do something
yeah.
about it, right?
All us talking people got to go. It's time for someone to do.
Exactly. On a lighter note, how is life in Neom? I know you like your meat. You and I have had enough amounts of Brazilian barbecue and meat sweats after. How do you like your life in the cab? How do you like the food?
It's I can't. Well, but the word is spoiled now.
Wow,
I mean, yeah, like
that
without a
says
doubt. I
something.
mean, I've been told that before and pretended to deny it, but there's no denying now. Like they make you very comfortable. I have my own, like we call it a villa, my own apartment style. I overlook the Red Sea. There's a Starbucks in camp, multiple gyms, tennis courts, anything you need to do. You even got a movie theater. Things like laundry and cooking and food. It's all done for you. So you're there to work,
Wow.
right? It's 4,000 person camp. It's very, very nice. You get paid flights home. Not enough paid flights home because of the cost, but it's a pretty gig. You're there to work, you're there to contribute, but they want to make it there's a hospital there, there's everything you're ever going to need, right? So yeah. Oh yeah, they got two schools right now, I think K-10, right? So there's
Nice.
people from all over that have their families there, and the young families and kids with grade 9 and 10. Those are interesting to see because I think for me it's just me there. It's good that way because I just have to manage myself. But they have events for the kids, and it's just literally is a kind of a small town community for sure. So there's the adjustments are not just to the working environment, but to the social environment inside the camp. And then there's outside of the camp to the Saudi environment, and there's so many different nuances. This crazy things like I heard this. It's not really well. I just say I heard this, but you get a photo radar ticket in northern Saudi Arabia, and before you stop your car, you have a text message and you have a debit in your bank account saying please pay your fine before you stop the car. So there's no
Wow.
there's no getting a surprise in the mailbox like Canada. I just heard.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're very efficient.
Wow.
Yeah, boom,
That's
snap, facial
impressive.
recognition, making sure it was you, and they got it all. You just have to hit pay on your bank account, and if you don't pay it, your exit and entry visa to the country gets revoked until you do. So you pay your speeding fine, or you don't,
Yeah, these are not things that you would expect coming out of Saudi or Middle East, right? Because of everything that we hear in the news and in the newspaper, right? It's not the Saudi is not portrayed to be this advanced, etc., etc. So it's been a real eye opener from that perspective. Yeah,
Oh,
you don't know until you love it, right?
well, I don't know about loving. I'm a Canadian at heart, and when it gets to plus 50 in the summertime and the wind blows, you've heard a wind chill here in Canada. When the wind's blowing over there, you
Exactly.
actually heat up. So 50 degrees feels like 52, 54. And that's
That's
50
crazy.
degrees Celsius. Yeah, I'm not used to
Crazy.
that. It's a great, great place. I admire it. Riyadh is probably one of the greatest cities I've ever been at. And I've been to, I think in 2024, you have the Google Place thing on your phone. It tells you I was over
Yeah.
to 330 different cities in that 1 year time frame through all the travel with Neom and back and forth home. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, yeah, it's been,
330 cities.
yes, different
That's
cities.
more than the lifetime of like 30 people, I think.
Yeah. So, like, if and when I get to retire, traveling is not at the top of the list right now. But I mean, I've been fortunate throughout my career for a couple different reasons. It's just the quality of people in this industry that I got the chance to work with and work for. And now this one here, this crazy idea, which quite frankly, when the recruiter called me, I thought it's got to be a scam. It's so off the wall right now. 8 months went by, and all this stuff. There was no decision to be made after that. It was there. It
Yeah,
was a once in a
yeah.
lifetime opportunity. And again, I think I don't really appreciate it until I'll be back.
What a great opportunity. I mean, if I was my situation was different, I would seriously consider a couple of years because it's like a sounds like a great opportunity where things are
Yeah, like
getting
I tell you, because
innovative, invented,
my
etc.,
kids are
etc.
older and kind of establishing their lives, they're on their way. There's like a little bit of a lull, right?
Yeah,
Not so, like you say, it keeps you young. It keeps that curiosity going. And it's just to learn that different perspective from different cultures, different groups, different people from all over the world. I mean, that that's invaluable at the end of the day. You don't get that in a short time.
absolutely.
Lucky to get that in a
100%.
lifetime.
100%. 100%. Yeah. All right, last question. Any words of wisdom, advice for someone young who might be starting out in the industry?
Wow, yeah. I think one thing is really important. Because I worked for rather. Doug Hinks told me at one time. He said, "Take the best from everybody and make your own style," and that holds true every day.
Great advice. Yeah. Yeah, I have to. That reminds me, Doug. I've got to get him sometime on this one too.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
work
yeah.
towards that.
And might have to do it. He'll be on the golf course somewhere for sure. But
Yeah, I'm gonna chase him around on the golf course,
yeah,
sit in
yeah,
a golf cart and do the podcast. We'll try that. We'll try that. All right, this has been great. Thanks for spending the
yeah. Thank
time.
you.
It's been awesome. And all the best with everything. And hopefully, once you're wrapped up your contract and decide what to do, we will hopefully meet you sometime in Alberta soon
Yeah,
enough.
and hey, everyone, take care. All right.
Thank you.